Hey folks, this is Screen Watching. My name is Dan Barrett, joined here by Simon Foster. Simon, happy birthday, my friend.
Yes, happy birthday, Dan Barrett. 1 year since we decided to kick off this crazy little thing we're doing, and it's been a year of good times and funs and several listeners. Thanks for being part of the experience.
Yeah, no. So we thank both of you for listening. It's really been a great experience. But Simon Foster, quite frankly, I feel this year has been highly productive in that it made me watch the movies I didn't really plan to watch, and one or two of them were good.
Yeah, one or two of them were quite good. And by the same way, I've been watching a lot of television that I maybe otherwise normally wouldn't watch. And a lot of that was very good. So as people can see with our new video format, I'm wearing my Arconia t-shirt, my Only Murders in the Building t-shirt. So that's very exciting too.
Yeah, and I'm breaking format because I'm wearing clothes this time. Usually I do this in a way that really just keeps me free and unencumbered to really provide my opinions in the most fluid, naturalistic way possible.
Which we're all very grateful for. So it is a video podcast, a vodcast. Is that still a thing? Is that even a word?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's bring it back. We'll take ownership of this retro phrase. So people will be able to watch us. And look, I haven't really looked into this at all, but I believe that Simon's going to pop this up on YouTube. I'm going to try uploading the videos to the Spotify. So if you cancelled your account because of Neil Young, in theory, if you're listening to us via Spotify right now, if you open up your app, you should be able to see us talking as well as listen to us when the app isn't visibly open. I think
something like that.
I haven't tried it before, so we're going to see that it actually works. I know that's how it works for controversial figures like your Joe Rogan and whatnot. I presume that's how it works for the average schmoes like you and I from the creator community. But Simon, big podcast, anniversary special, doing it as video for once. And the podcast that's sticking around, we're not changing formats that much. It's all going to be fine.
And you get no edits. You get the whole thing without any edits. You're going to get all the mistakes, all the fluffs, all the swearing. It's going to be up there on the screen.
Oh my God, you will turn blue when you listen to some of the words I'm going to drop here in real life. It's going to be incredible. And just as a special treat for our video listeners, we're going to put in no real effort to the video editing of this whatsoever because Simon's in charge of that part of it, which means that when we play audio clips, they're just going to play in the background so you can watch Simon and I just scratch our chins for a moment as we listen to the audio shows. It's going to be great. Folks, stick around. This is going to be one heck of a screen watching podcast.
It's not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover. That's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for it.
And of course, this is the Screen Watching Podcast. My name's Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. Big show this week. I'm going to be talking about two TV shows, which are also really, really good shows.
Wow.
After Party, which is an Apple TV Plus show. And I'm also going to talk about the new police tension-riddled cop drama Trigger Points, which is an ITV show from the UK that's streaming here in Australia on Stan.
I'll be talking about The Eyes of Tammy Faye. I've decided to forego the full makeup treatment that Tammy Faye wore so spectacularly through her years in the limelight. Just this weekend for everyone, I won't be wearing the makeup. And then I'll be reviewing a new movie called The Fallout, which is on Binge in Oz and HBO Max in the US. And it is one of the most honest and toughest movies you'll see in a long time. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, well, all that and more. Let's dive right into reviews.
It stinks.
Now, a film that just wasn't on my radar at all, but came very quickly on my radar when I saw it sitting there on HBO Max, because I got a sneaky login for that. So I took a gander at it, but it is streaming now. It's playing now in Australia, in cinemas. It's The Eyes of Tammy Faye.
Tammy Faye, what'd you do?
Hello, Mother. This is Jim Baker, my husband. It's all part of our mission to help people. Anyone who's hurting or they feel like they've been left out, God has a plan for us.
What'd he tell you to do this time?
Okay, Simon, tell me what this is about, even though I've seen it.
Okay, so Tammy Faye Baker was one half of an evangelist team. Jim Baker was her husband. This is a story that not only tells their rise and spectacular fall in the eyes of the public back in the early 80s, but also the story of an American dream that goes well off the rails. This The story of Tammy Faye, who's played spectacularly by Jessica Chastain. She's wonderful in this. It shows in America all coming together at a certain point where television and the medium became available to so many more people. Religion became a very marketable commodity, and the world of opinion and world of I guess you could say, what's the word I'm looking for? The world of, Dan, help me out here. Kind of a love for the celebrity is the word I'm looking for. That kind of reality TV world was coming together all at a certain point. And the story of Tammy Faye Bakker, her rise and then massive collapse, represents all of that. At the heart of it, it's just a sweet kid's story. Tammy Faye came from a small home in the sort of the backwoods of Minnesota and rises to this extraordinary public figure, all while trying to do good for the world. And this movie really paints Jim Bakker, played pretty well by Andrew Garfield. I thought there might have been a little bit of miscasting there, but he kind of pulls it off in the end. He's and this shows how he manipulated her goodness to make his fortune. The film, I think, is a fairly conventional biopic of an unconventional woman, but it still is a very entertaining story that really captures an America at a time where we can now look back and see that a whole lot of things were going wrong in the world of entertainment, in the world of religion, that sort of set the platform for the world we live in today.
See, I saw this so much more about like the naivete of a lot of the, well, we'll just say followers, but then also when that meets the very sort of cynical, calculating financial elements that take a very strong role within, particularly Americans' evangelical religious structures.
Yeah, and that is personified none more so in Jerry Falwell, who was a major figure at the time, who's played by Vincent D'Onofrio in the film, who's really terrific. What I think is really quite disturbing about this is the manipulation that Jim Bakker sort of not only places upon his wife, but also I guess the manifestations of falseness that he creates for himself. He doesn't know that he's doing terrible things all the time, or he's so blind to his own way of thinking and way of doing business that it's a really tragic downfall for him as well. At the center of all this is an incredible Jessica Chastain. She absolutely lives as Tammy Faye. And if it seems like the movie it reminded me of was I, Tonya, in that it creates this portrait of a woman who's an out there figure and a completely sort of idiosyncratic type of person, but does it with a very sort of sentimental and a very sort of honest look at the person she really was.
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking up who the director was. Michael Showalter, who people would know as a former Kids in the Hall. Oh, no, that's not Michael Showalter. Not a Kids in the Hall. He's a, oh gosh, what's the American troupe that I can't think of the names of it all?
Oh, that Mantzoukas was part of, and
Mantzoukas part of it all.
Nick Kroll, I think, was in there as well. It'll come to us. Send us an email, friends. You know who you were talking about.
Well, I was thinking of the comedy troupe Stella.
Okay. I don't know who that is. But yeah, no, Michael Showalter was the name who's been around for quite some time. He did didn't he do the Wet Hot American Summer stuff as well, I think, was Showalter.
So yeah, he's in with all those guys, with David Wayne and whatnot. Anyway, the casting I thought was particularly interesting. So Andrew Garfield, I have a very strong love affair with. I really like Andrew Garfield, and I was a little apprehensive for the first couple of minutes that I saw him on screen here, but very quickly I was won over. But Jessica Chastain, oh my God, what a triumph of not only performance, but also of makeup and costume design. I don't generally like that idea, and I think I even said this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, that idea where people are like, oh, I just couldn't even recognize the actor under that. Like, they lost themselves in the performance. But it's legitimately true here. Like, I did not see Jessica Chastain on screen at all. It was effectively just an actress embodying Tammy Faye Bakker.
Tammy Faye, yeah. And that extends right from the very start of the film, where we see her as Jessica Chastain as a sort of a teenager, right through to the point where she's sort of almost the caricature of a fully made up self. And it's it's an incredible performance. And you're right about Andrew Garfield. Now, I'm not quite in the Andrew Garfield boat as you are. But earlier this week, I watched Tick Tick Boom on Netflix, the Joseph Larson story, the guy who wrote Rent, and he is incredible in that. It is a wonderful, wonderful film. And so I was really on board with him in this movie as well. But he seems young. He plays quite young, and the aging isn't quite as convincing. The aging makeup isn't quite as convincing on him as it is on Jessica Chastain. But they're terrific together.
I think he generally, as an actor, he tends to play young very well. So it was a bit of a stretch to him in the sort of later.
You know, it's a shame that this film has sort of fallen into the late January, early February slot here at the cinemas. It's kind of a dead zone for movies, and I think there was a lot of Oscar buzz and a lot of award season buzz around her performance, which hasn't quite sort of manifest over the last few weeks. So it's kind of dropping into this dead zone at the movies, which is a shame because it really does deserve to be seen.
Yeah, the thing that's probably been lost from this conversation is the film's funny. Like, it's
very funny,
vibrant, really commercially accessible movie in so many ways. And I know that Barrett HQ, there were a few family members who were a bit apprehensive about watching it, but they were won over very quickly on the film.
Hugely enjoyable film. It's called The Eyes of Tammy Faye. It's in cinemas around Australia as we speak.
And speaking of funny, let's take a gander at the new Apple TV Plus series, The After Party.
My goal is to find out who killed Xavier. Now, you all went to your high school reunion for what? Second chances at life? Love? Something else? I would just love it if you could just skip to the part where the murder happened.
I'm telling you a story here. I'm building character arcs, dynamics.
Now, in the same way the recent Steve Martin short Hulu series, Only Murders in the Building, felt like a throwback to the sort of late 80s, early 90s, story-driven, character-driven comedies that used to dominate movie theaters, the new Apple TV Plus series, The After Party, it feels like a throwback to those hip mid-90s indie comedies that used to drive attention at art house cinemas, but languish a little bit on smaller screens at the multiplex. This is a series produced by Into the Spider-Verse's Phil Lord and Chris Miller, but created by Chris Miller, who directs every episode of this. And it's an 8-episode whodunit murder mystery set in the hours after a high school reunion after party. The host of the party, who's an awful pop star turned actor, he's been killed, and the detectives are interviewing all the suspects one by one to determine who the culprit is. 8 suspects, 8 episodes in the show, you can see where this is going. So leading the investigation's Tiffany Haddish. She's there alongside Search Party's John Early, and you got suspects that include Sam Richardson from Veep, Ben Schwartz that you know as Jean Ralphio from Parks and Recreation, Ike Barinholtz from The Mindy Project, Lana Glazer from Broad City, and a host of other recognizable faces. And then you got the victim, who's the good Franco brother, Dave Franco. This is an all-star cast that will delight the hipper TV fans of popular fringe shows from the last 10 years or so. Now, every episode of the series takes on a different perspective. Obviously, it's Rashomon style. I think I'm legally obligated to refer to it as Rashomon style in a review if it does adapt that format. And it's about the suspects who are recounting the events of the evening. Now, while the show remains tonally consistent through all the 8 episodes, it allows the show to take on different traits every episode as the unique personalities of the suspects start driving the narrative for each episode. So in the first 3 episodes of the show, which debut yesterday on Apple TV Plus, so Saturday the 28th, so you get the first 3 now, the breadth of the show is fully on display. You got Sam Richardson as the focus for the first episode, and through his eyes we see a cute relationship comedy that's powered by a typically sweet Richardson performance. But then the next episode feels a lot more dangerous and slightly angry, with Ike Barinholtz taking the reins of the story as he tells the story of his efforts to win back his ex-wife, who's currently being wooed by the Richardson character, although Barinholtz doesn't realize that. And then you've got the 3rd episode, which is an annoyingly funny musical comedy with the egotistical madness that is Ben Schwartz at the center of it all. Now, each performance on the show is a complete knockout. The script is really nicely tailored to the strength of each of the series' leads. And while I think while it's great that every episode gives the performance an opportunity to really showcase what it is that makes them an appealing screen presence, as an ensemble, their grouping feels kind of incongruous. So there's a 10-year age gap between some of the actors. So it's a bit of a stretch at times to completely buy that Ike Barinholtz and Dave Franco might have attended school together in the same year. Like, it's hard to buy that. But as performers, they all gel on screen together really nicely. And there's a genuine sense of lifelong familiarity between many of the players. And look, while the after party won't be making many critics' top 10 lists at the end of the year, although look, to be honest, I don't think Only Murders in the Building would make many people's top 10 lists, but I think it was number one with a bullet on yours, Simon.
Absolutely was.
So look, I could be completely off board on this. The show, I feel it like Only Murders in the Building. It lacks a technical inventiveness, and it doesn't really distinguish itself with particularly fresh performances or characters. But I think it's a show that will resonate with a lot of viewers. It is a complete crowd pleaser. This has all the elements that will encourage viewers who connect with it to return to the show for repeat viewings over the years. The show delivers a funny, very watchable, great time. And look, as I said, the show may not be the year's best TV, but it may be your favorite show of this year.
Okay, probably worth checking out. A little side note here that Only Murders Left in the Building received a Writers Guild and a Producers Guild award through the week, so suck it. And I'm super keen to see the after party. Haddish is someone who I think is an extraordinary talent, and when given the right material on screen, she does amazing work. So hopefully this will be it for her. So yeah, and like Barinholtz always makes me laugh, always has made me laugh. He's a very funny guy. So yeah, lots to enjoy about the after party by the sounds of it.
What's all this hopefully business? I'm telling you, this show is the business. It's good.
It's the business. All right, okay, I'm watching it. I'm watching it. No, fine. Apple TV, as we speak, go watch now, as I'll be doing. With the cricket season coming to an end, I'll be watching a lot more television.
Yes. Now going from two very sort of surreal and funny TV programs, we're going to go somewhere a little bit deeper and darker right now. And I just want to give a bit of a content warning. This is going to be a segment now which is going to refer to some school shootings. I believe it's a fictionalized account of some school shootings, but obviously we're going to be talking about things which, you know, have some emotional resonance. And the clip we're about to play from it right now, particularly, I think really speaks to that. So if you're a little bit unnerved by it, maybe jump ahead a couple of minutes and we'll join you back in the podcast shortly. But before then, let's talk about the movie, The Fallout.
You don't even need to wear makeup. Sorry, what? I just said you don't even need to wear makeup.
What was that?
Oh, okay, we dropped out. Sorry, I just dropped out for a second there. Yeah, The Fallout is a new series from writer-director Megan Park, which tells the story of two girls, one played by Jenny Ortega. She stars as Vader, a very sort of every person teen with the greasy hair and the untucked t-shirts and the swearing and still joking about going to the toilet during class. And the wonderful Maddie Ziegler, who is the other woman, the other young girl who is trapped with Vader in a bathroom stall when a shooter goes into their school. The film follows, as the title suggests, the fallout from that event as it impacts these two girls. The Maddie Ziegler character sort of stumbles into substance abuse to try to deal with the long nights and dull days that come with post-traumatic stress disorder. Whereas Vader sort of does all she can to avoid feeling anything. And in the performance that Jenny Ortega gives, we see a really tragic portrayal of a young girl who was full of life, have that sort of energy sucked out of her by the actions of this insane individual. I should point out, you never see the shooting. You do see some blood in moments that are very impactful, and you experience the event through the eyes of these two girls, which makes it no less terrifying. It also shows the extended impact that an event like this has on family, community, and all those around not only the girls' lives, but the school's life as well. The film leads up to the girls' return to school. It also sort of shows the lengths to which these young people will go to try to deal with the horrors of a school shooting, when very often the community itself isn't prepared for it. So these kids are totally left alone. It is I guess it's kind of uplifting in the end, in that it shows a couple of young people coming to terms with the reality of their lives and moving through horrible moments. But it also has a very bleak sort of fade out, where it suggests that all over America, kids just like these two in the movie are going through it every single day. It has won screenplay awards and audience awards at festivals like South by Southwest. It comes to the Binge platform here in Australia and is available through HBO Max in the US. So yes, be warned that this is a fairly grueling look at a social phenomena that is inexplicable in my eyes in today's society, and which, as pointed out in the film, the powers that be don't want to seem to do anything about, and which is the real tragedy in all of this. So it's called The Fallout, and it's one of the great dramas that I've seen on the small screen this year.
Yeah, look, I am interested in this one. I've heard nothing but good things. I don't know. It seems a little bit bleak for where I'm at right now as a viewer, but you know, I'm certainly sure this is something I'll come around to at a certain point, because I am definitely curious about checking this one.
And it'll be remembered as maybe the role that sets up Jenny Ortega for a big career in film and television. She can be seen on screen at the moment in Scream, the reworking of the old franchise. And she's coming up as Wednesday Addams in the Wednesday TV show. So she's a big deal. And Maddie Ziegler, who copped a lot of flack for her role in the film Music opposite Kate Hudson last year, she proves once again what an extraordinary young actress she is and can be in the role. Those two are fabulous together, and very sort of different characters on screen who become friends, but there's not a false note in any of the acting.
Look, she may have copped a lot of flack for it, but also I think the majority of people have no idea what that movie is, and I don't think it's going to hinder her whatsoever. What even is that film? I've got no idea.
Music is the one that the Australian singer Sia made, and in the film, she plays an autism sufferer. And we sort of had a discussion about it when it came out. I thought it wasn't. I don't want to get into it too much here because we'll get complaints again. But she's a terrific young actress in this, and The Fallout certainly shows her in that light.
Was that only last year?
Yeah, it was. I know.
COVID times. Hey, Simon, let's move on. I want to talk to you about the explosive new, there's a bit of a pun there, explosive new ITV cop drama. Wasn't that good? Wasn't that creative? The series is called Trigger Point.
We're acting on intel. There's a bomb factory.
On police! On me!
My gut tells me we're dealing with sophisticated bombers.
Knows how to move, knows how to behave like a firearms officer. He's an organised terrorist.
I'm bomb disposal. I need you to stay still for me, okay?
You need to hurry!
30 seconds.
Wait.
Now, Simon, what we watch says a lot about the concerns and passions of viewers. When you look at the UK right now, where the most popular TV dramas are these anti-terrorism, uber tense, masculine police dramas, one can't help but question how unnerved the people are right now. Trigger Point, it's yet another propulsive, stress-inducing series from Jed Mercurio. He's the creative producer of smash hit shows like Bodyguard and Line of Duty. He isn't the one writing this one. It's Daniel Brearley who's breaking out as writer-creator of the show, but it is produced by Mercurio, and the vibe of the series is very much in line with his previous work. It even brings Line of Duty star Vicky McClure along for the ride. Now, in Trigger Point, you've got two teams of Expo Police. These are trained bomb disposal experts, and they're called to a London tower block where there's been a report called in overnight of a bomb factory that's in one of the apartments. Teams of police pour into the apartment complex of some guy named Andy Phelan, who's nowhere to be found. Now, I don't want to tip the show's hand here, so instead I'll lean into the question that hangs over the first hour of the series, which is how involved is Mr. Phelan, and is this bomb factory the work of one lone wolf guy, or is it part of a much bigger terrorist action? And you'll certainly know the answer to this by the end of the first episode. Now, like Mercurio's other shows, this blends together very blokey, tense action with soapy interpersonal drama. Now, we've got two Expo team leaders at the core of this. You've got Vicky McClure and you've got Adrian Lester as former teammates working out of Afghanistan who now balance disarming bombs in London with regular revelatory chats about the terrible state of their private lives. Now, Lester's character, the awkwardly named Joel Nutkins, he's got a failed marriage and he's got kids that he's contending with, while McClure's Lana Washington, which is a name as TV as a TV character has ever been named, is clearly dealing with her own personal trauma while also sleeping with a colleague who's far more attached to her than she is of him. Now, while the balance of the personal and the private certainly play out better here, the relationship's integral to driving elements of the plot and character than they ever do in US network dramas that tread similar ground. And I'm thinking about those just terrible long sequences in shows like 24, another counterterrorism drama, where they try to tack that personal versus professional relationship aspect into it. And boy, does that clunk. It's not quite the case here, but the conversations that bring those aspects to the story, they do feel awkwardly shoehorned in. So Lester's character specifically, he seems really desperate to take a break from all the silly bomb disposal business throughout the rest of the episode to start delivering long expository conversation about his love life, and it's a little bit too much. French director Giles Banier, he does a great job of keeping the tension high and the action rocketing through the first episode. At no point will you ever feel compelled to pick up your phone to look away, and that is an achievement in itself. It all moves very quickly with violent propulsion that'll never give you the chance to remember you still haven't finished today's game of Wordle. Trigger Point, it's got moments of feeling a little bit dumb, and it's less sophisticated than it purports to be, but it's never not entertaining, it's never not gripping. The show is every bit as engaging as TV should aspire to be.
Great review. Thank you for putting Wordle in there. Now I'll hashtag that and it'll go crazy on the socials.
It was only a matter of time.
Sure. One of the great joys of doing this podcast, apart from seeing your face every week, which is now there for everyone to see, you've got me watching British shows, action shows and British thrillers, which I have never been a big part of my TV watching experience. Trigger Point sounds like the next one. I know you weren't a big fan of Vigil, but I watched that when I wouldn't have normally watched something like that. But and I'm sort of leaning into some of the stuff that's coming up on the Acorn TV network, which is a whole lot of British TV as well. So Trigger Point certainly sounds like something I will lean into myself.
Just curious about that. So you obviously like the submarine drama of Vigil, which I wasn't so keen on, but I'm not huge on submarine dramas. So that was a bit of a impediment to my enjoyment of it. But what are you leaning towards? Are you leaning towards these more sort of, because British TV really seems to be falling into two modes right now, where you've got these hyper tense, just dripping with very sort of masculine subject matter like police dramas or a submarine detective show like that is. You've got those, or you've got quaint British countryside things with British people doing very British stuff like drinking tea and solving murder mysteries. Like, what are you watching? Are you just watching a mix of this kind of stuff, or are you really falling into this line of this? Because shows like Trigger Point are uber popular right now. Like, these shows are going gangbusters, which I think really just says something about where the UK is at politically. But what are you watching?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I'm not watching a lot of these. When they come across our radar for the podcast and when interview opportunities come up, I make sure I see them. I grew up watching things like The Professionals and Danger UXB and stuff like that. So that's the sort of British action thriller television that I'm familiar with. No, I don't watch the All Creatures Great and Small, and I don't watch the small town murder mysteries that are part and parcel of British television. But I may do heading forward, because there's certainly been some quality ones this year that I've discovered. So it's a new kind of TV watching for me. It maybe it speaks to my age. Maybe I'm just finding a little bit of comfort food in those. But certainly the quality of something like Vigil, that I watched, the storytelling in that and the production values of that have got me sort of re-energized and rethinking some of my TV viewing experience.
Yeah. Simon, that probably winds down our conversation with reviews, and instead we're going to move to Australia's favorite segment. It's called The Middle Bit. Now, did I remember to queue up a audio sting for this? No, I did not. So
all right. Does that work?
Maybe we can just find something on the soundboard here and see if we can just sort of
press a button and see what comes up.
What have we got here?
That's a good one.
That's not going to work. No. Look, I mean,
so that was our first live review segment, and I stumbled through it. You're clearly much more prepared than I was. So well done, Dan Barrett. I think that went very well. And now we move to the screen watching middle bit. That was me stretching. See, in the world of television, that's called stretching.
Yeah, I found something which we don't really hear much of on the show, so we could give this a go. Applause?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds good.
I'm just used to hearing this.
I love your critics. I love your crickets. Okay, so the screen watching middle bit, this was your idea. You are on a roll with the middle bit stuff. You are coming up with some great ideas. 40 years ago, David Letterman debuted on late night on NBC, which got you thinking, What is it with the late night chat show format, and why has it endured as part of the TV landscape? And we could look at maybe the best and the worst of TV's after dark talkers. Is that kind of where we're going?
That's exactly where we're at. So the thing you have to keep in mind is, one, the reason we're doing this segment is because I love US late night talk shows. I am such a fan of the format. So there's that. But also in terms of TV, because obviously we talk about TV a fair bit here, like there is no more sort of long-lasting, enduring format than these late night chat shows. They've dominated US late night TV since, essentially TV was really a thing. So from the late 50s onwards, there's been at least one of these types of shows regularly being broadcast. Every network these days has them in the United States. In Australia, we don't really have a tradition of late night TV viewing generally. Like TV obviously broadcasts through into the evening, into the early hours and through to 6 a.m. when the morning show is off. And while we have shows like the breakfast TV shows that you find in the US and the UK, that's definitely a format that we've adopted and we're really quite comfortable. Outside of a couple of attempts in Australia, we don't really do this. So you've got things like Vizard back in the day who just tried to rip off the Letterman program generally.
That, which was very successful. Vizard was a big deal for a couple of years there. That's very true.
Not that long though, like only about 4 or 5 years in that kind of way. Andrew Denson, when he moved over from the ABC to 7, he ran the Denson program for it was like maybe about 3 or 4 years, and that didn't do particularly that great business. It was running on Tuesday and Thursday nights for quite a while, and I remember watching a lot of that. And then you get the occasional one that sort of drops in, but it's pretty rare and far between. But in the US, they're there all the time, and it's a big deal this week that David Letterman's there. He's going to be appearing in the Seth Meyers late night show, because the show that he launched back in 1982, that's still running. It's been through a number of hosts. So it was David Letterman, then Conan took the show over, then Fallon. Now you got Seth Meyers hosting that program. And just to talk about the importance of these programs and like how much money they make for the networks, late night is a show that launches at 12:30 at night. That's
extraordinary.
Yeah. And so it's a show that also had a very strong youth audience to it, obviously. So it was young people and then insomniacs. That's basically the entire audience for the program. And the vibe of 12:30 at night, because it was talking to young people, those younger people start getting older. And so the youth culture starts permeating through the rest of the schedule. So the David Letterman cultural experience then suddenly started finding its way through the rest of pop culture, because the people who were watching that show got older and then were suddenly in charge of making TV themselves. So the David Letterman show, more influential than you really give it a lot of credit for.
We should point out exactly how that's exactly right. I totally agree. We should also point out at how enormous these late night talkers were through the early years of television. Now, even I'm far too young to remember the likes of Dick Cavett and Mike Douglas and Jack Parr. Of course, I know of Johnny Carson, and one of the groundbreaking late night talk show hosts that we didn't see a lot of out here, certainly didn't see a lot of his talk show, was Arsenio Hall. So these are names that had enormous influence back in the day before the fractured nature of the current viewing climate sort of happened. For my money, and clearly for your money, Letterman was the man who I think is the last of that generation, the last of the great late night talk show hosts who really toyed with the format and brought some extraordinary moments to late night television with originality. And I think he started on breakfast television, didn't he? He had or morning television.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I was just taking exception to the idea that Letterman was the last to really play with the format. I think Conan really came along and did a lot to format as well. And Conan's also the last of that breed of late night TV show host. Everyone else is more about sort of playing games, and it's quite a different beast.
Well, see, that's interesting, because to me, Conan, who I love, who's second only to Letterman in my eyes, to me, he was the first of the late night host/comedians. I think Letterman worked within the format and did extraordinary things that were funny and groundbreaking and challenging to the format, whereas Conan, and I also thought Letterman was a terrific interviewer. I don't know if Conan was a terrific interviewer. I don't think that any of the Jimmys are great interviewers. They're more sort of comedians looking for funny moments.
The thing with the format, none of the hosts are good interviewers.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But you're kind of right in saying that up until Conan, it was more that were broadcasters who fell into hosting these shows than comedians. But keep in mind, Carson was a comedian. He was a comedian/magician. So like
Yes,
that
he
was his
was.
background before he took over the show, and he's probably the most iconic of any of these hosts. So it's probably wrong to say that Conan was the first sort of true comedian sort of hosting it. But then also you have to look at figures like Joan Rivers, and also, I mean, wasn't strictly the host of the show for quite a few years, but Jay Leno kind of came up at about the same time as Letterman. Obviously, he was doing guest spots on Carson quite regularly, so he was regularly seen as a late night host, even if he didn't get his own late night show until the early 90s. But just going back, you mentioned Dick Cavett a short while ago. Dick Cavett's not someone that I've really seen for much of my life at all, up until with the rise of some of the niche streaming services around a place. The Dick Cavett show has actually been made fairly widely available. And if you kind of like chat TV programming, check out the Dick Cavett show, because these are long form interviews. This is obviously a show from the 70s, so the guests aren't exactly the most sort of current. But if you want to check out, and I'm just loading it up now, there's about 12 seasons worth of the Dick Cavett show with various episodes, not every episode by any means, on the Tubi app.
Sure.
So if you download Tubi, that's Tubi. You can find all sorts of obscure, weirdo TV programming there, and you will see all sorts of really interesting interviews. Like I'm currently just looking at season 12 of the program, and this is who you've got as guests. So episode 1 has Lloyd Kaufman. So obviously he
Wow.
did Troma movies. Episode 2 has wait a second. Michael Moore. What year is that
See,
from? 1980s. That'd be a very young Michael Moore.
I reckon.
Can't be
See,
right.
Michael Moore?
This doesn't seem right. That's a bad listing, I think. Who else we've got here? We've got. Oh, sorry, I just realized. So the season 12 is essentially taking episodes from throughout the various run, and I've grouped them into categories. So all the interviews here are interviews with directors. So this one claims it's a 1980 interview with Michael Moore. That doesn't sound right to me at all. There's a 1991 interview with the Coen brothers.
Okay.
There's a 92 interview with Soderbergh. You've got Paul Schrader. You've got Ron Howard.
That's huge. These are big names.
John
And Kevin.
Ingmar Bergman.
Wow.
Robert Altman in 1990. There's a Polanski interview. Jean-Luc Godard. Kurosawa.
Okay, so he clearly had, for these directors, an in with the American public, and Cavett's influence on viewing habits beyond his talk show is clear here, and that was the sort of impact that, you know, people and people like Jerry Seinfeld talk about getting the being asked to the chair on the Johnny Carson show after they've done their comedy bit on his show. So these were people who had enormous influence over the entertainment industry, and that extended right through to Letterman and into the modern breed as well.
So what we actually want to talk about on the show is, first of all, just our own experience with late night. So Simon, for you, what is it that you like about these programs? Like, who are the hosts that you gravitate towards, and what is it you like about what they bring to it?
Okay, so for me, as I've mentioned, Letterman was king and will always be king. His irreverence, his accepting that part of what he has to do is talk to people like Farrah Fawcett and Paris Hilton, but then at the same time, being willing to take them down a peg. There's been some sort of retroactive thought that he was a bit cruel as an interviewer, I think, taken out of the context of the time and the context of the guest celebrity. That's a bit unfair. But for me, Letterman was able to do things with the format that, while on the surface appeared quite simple, things like dropping watermelons off the roof of the studio building, or a top 10 list, which was fairly standard for a lot of comedians and late night talk show host. I think he brought an energy to and an intellect to that has never been seen before. You've got moments like the Joaquin Phoenix interview when he was in character for that film. You've got the Andy Kaufman versus Jerry Lawler wrestling controversy that is still doing the rounds on YouTube. And of course, anytime Bill Murray turned up on the Letterman show, they were good friends, and Murray put everything into getting dressed up in costumes and going out of his way to make it an entertaining interview. So Letterman was and remains the king, I think. And as you mentioned, all of his subsequent, those that have come after him have said that they grew up on Letterman and loved his work. The other one I would throw in there are the two Craigs, Craig Kilborn and Craig Ferguson. Similarly, did pretty amazing things with their talk show hosts. Especially, I didn't see a lot of Kilborn, but I certainly saw a lot of Ferguson, and the willingness that he was happy to go to get a laugh was unique in the late night format.
Yeah, so the guys that I like are the ones that subvert the format. So the 3 figures that I really wanted to talk about, actually, sorry, 4 figures really. David Letterman was the first one I really got exposed to. So we never really got Letterman during the peak of late night with David Letterman. I think it was only when the Late Show kicked off that we started actually getting it here in Australia. But you can find like so many late night with Letterman episodes on YouTube from the very first episode through onwards. So Letterman was really my guy when I was like really young. In my teens, my parents got Foxtel, and the Conan O'Brien late night show was up and running by that point. So I really liked him, and he was fairly subversive. From that, Craig Ferguson as well. And then in later years, I have come across Dick Cavett, and I've really enjoyed his interviews. And what all 4 of those guys have in common is that there's a subversive element where it's really tipping the format on its head and taking things in entirely different directions. So when Letterman first launched, it was a show that launched straight after the Johnny Carson late night Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Because it launched after that, there were a few stipulations from the Carson people of what Letterman was allowed to do on the show and what he couldn't. He couldn't open with a monologue. So the show launched with what they called opening remarks, which were really just like a 30-second spiel of not even really quite jokes, just a few sort of pithy comments, and then get on with the show. And then other things he did was he had sort of tape pieces. He used to have like a regular assortment of just weirdo guests that have on there, like Calvert DeForest, who's like this sort of strange old man that he'd have go to like the local bus centers and just do strange things on the street and do crosses with them. And then like that sort of evolved into other things like dropping watermelons off the roofs, and Letterman dressing up in like a Velcro suit and being flung up against Velcro walls, and just absolute nonsense. Him being dropped into large vats of various substances. It was just strange weirdo TV that plays perfectly well at 12:30 at night. And a lot of credit there is not necessarily David Letterman, but it's Meryl Marco, who was the head writer of that show. And when she ended up leaving Letterman, it definitely lost a lot of that originality and that sort of sparkle that the show really had. And she'd been with him from his morning breakfast show, which you mentioned earlier that I just hadn't gotten back to. So before he did the late night show, he hosted the David Letterman show, which ran for, I think, about a year and a bit. And that started in 1980 and was like a 9 a.m. daytime talk show. But a lot of the stuff that we find on his late night show kind of originated with him doing in the early hours of, well, not the early hours of the morning, but certainly mid-morning television, which is kind of weird to think about. Conan, when he launched, he wanted to have a show that was the opposite of what Letterman was doing. So instead of doing a lot of tape pieces, which they did a little bit of that, it was a lot of sketch comedy that introduced onto the show, lots of big, fun, colorful characters, and just complete silliness as opposed to like the edginess of Letterman's humor. So I really like Conan because he was kind of the counter to that Letterman. And so I could watch both hosts and see their various sort of shtick on display. Craig Ferguson, again, when he took over as the host of the Late Late Show after David Letterman, like that was just a complete nutball show where he was off all the time. It was just very much his id on display. And then he started introducing things which were a bit more Conan-like in that he had Secretariat, the dancing horse that used to appear off stage. And then also there was a robot named Jeff Peterson that he introduced, which was kind of like a Aussie ostrich type character in terms of having a co-host. But like it was a very foul-mouthed, rude robot that used to banter with Craig Ferguson. Strange to be. But then just getting back to the Dick Cavett of it all, this was a late night chat show that was working in opposition to the Tonight Show with Carson. And so instead of being a big popularist sort of a show, he was more sort of approaching an intellectual crowd with it. So it was regularly chats with Orson Welles and like Hollywood yesteryear stars. And it was really different vibes, what you'd find. It was very conversationally based. So when we opened the segment saying that all of them were bad interviews, that's not true because Dick Cavett existed.
That's very true. Now, the name that we've barely touched on and someone who that I have never found is an easy watch is Jay Leno. There's a lot of bitterness there because of him usurping David Letterman for Johnny Carson's mantle. If you haven't read The Late Shift or seen the movie version of The Late Shift, do so. That is an incredible read and sort of takes into account the maneuverings, the machinations that were underway behind the scenes to move Letterman out of that prime slot, replacing Johnny Carson, and bring Jay Leno in because they thought he had more popularity with the middle America. His humor was broader. That's why I don't like Leno. He's a gag comic. He's very much, and I think Jimmy Fallon has stepped into the Jay Leno shoes as that giggly kind of comedian host who's not really interested in talking to the guests about what interests the guests, more involving them in his humor and his attempts at a gag. I think for me, the current character who's probably doing the most interesting work is Jimmy Kimmel with Seth Meyers just behind him. These are the modern breed that are bringing some really interesting stuff to the format. But for me, I don't think I've watched a Leno all the way through, even when he's had some of the more interesting guests on there. He always pipped Letterman in the ratings because of his broader humor.
That's strictly not true. So when Letterman launched, like, he ended up outrating Jay Leno for, I want to say it's about the first 10 or 11 months. And then we had the good fortune of having Hugh Grant on as a guest, and that was straight after the, what's her name, Divine Brown incident, where he picked up a young lady in a car and got busted by the police. And as soon as that episode went to air, like, suddenly the fortunes changed, and Letterman was, far behind Leno as far as ratings were concerned.
Yeah, exactly right. And what are your thoughts on the modern breed? Colbert, Fallon, Kimmel, Myers?
With Leno, if you want to see something wild, get on YouTube and watch some of the appearances of Jay Leno on the Late Night with David Letterman program. And you'll see Leno as a late night guest and in his element, because Dave and Jay were contemporaries. And if you look at the Leno then, he is a vastly different performer than the Leno you're thinking of.
Absolutely.
Like, he's laugh out loud funny. He's incredibly edgy. Okay, he is like that guy I would watch on a late night chat show with no question whatsoever. He's fantastic. But
he's certainly dumbed down a lot.
Yeah, like he took his act and went very middle of the road and really tried to become as big a populist as he could. And that to me is not the version of Leno that I connect with the most. But in terms of the current crop, I tend to watch a lot of Colbert, but I wouldn't necessarily say that he's the most formally inventive by any means. I just kind of like him. And the show is always a reliable watch with interesting guests. And I think the show just kind of works for me. Seth Meyers, I want to like more, but there's just something about the Seth Meyers experience that I just don't really quite connect with. And Kimmel, I kind of get the same thing, where I really like Jimmy Kimmel, but I just don't really enjoy the show all that much.
I think for me, Kimmel is the maybe the most fearless of the lot. He's the most opinionated. He doesn't mind coming out with the stronger opinions to So, and I think I sort of respond to that a bit more than the straight up funny guy. Fallon, Jimmy Fallon to me, he's such a giggler. He seems to force the laugh. And that just drives me a little bit mad.
Yeah, unwatchable. And then don't get me started on Corden.
No, we haven't mentioned Corden, but hey, if you do get a chance, have a look at Kimmel. He did a guest spot on James Corden's show, and they were meant to be insulting each other. And Jimmy Kimmel ended the whole segment by saying, can you name two of the cameramen who will work on your show? And Corden couldn't name the cameraman, and it was hugely embarrassing.
That is fantastic. The great thing with Kimmel is that he's not afraid to let the audience know that he doesn't suffer fools.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think that's what I reacted. That's interesting. And we shouldn't talk about late night shows without mentioning probably the two greatest Australian exponents of the format, the Graham Kennedy-Bert Newton combination for In Melbourne Tonight and the Graham Kennedy Show, and the Don Lane Show, which also featured Bert Newton. They were sort of hugely popular in their day, very much embracing the Carson/Letterman kind of model. But when you get a personality like Don Lane or like Graham Kennedy in the driver's seat, the comedy and the anarchy and what might happen is just as entertaining as what does happen. So they were two great names in late night Australian television.
Yeah, worth noting that being Australian TV, they weren't late night. They were very much the mid to late evening programs.
Yeah, I think Don Lane was kind of 9:30. I'm too young to remember when Melbourne IMT was on, but
I think
they're still spoken.
Where you found those. Yeah. But also probably worth noting in that conversation is McAuliffe when he was hosting his evening talk show.
Sure, also very funny.
Yeah, and probably the thing that we need to finish the conversation with is that much like other beloved genres of television, this is a format on the decline. So you're finding now Conan O'Brien, who was the longest running of any of these hosts, like he's given up his Monday to Thursday late night chat show with the idea that he's going to be doing what's believed to be a half hour long show. And that's kind of where TV's going. As broadcast becomes less dominant, if you want to be able to really make an impact on television, it has to be a weekly program that can be dialed up on a streaming service without too much of a impact on your consumption. So people, it's pretty rare to find someone who's watching 5 episodes a week of Colbert. Like I tend to, but I'm a weirdo. Like that just doesn't really happen. So it's very much people are still watching broadcast in really big numbers, are the ones doing that. But any of these hosts that want to have longevity, you need to be embracing the formats that you're seeing with people like John Oliver, like essentially sort of half hour to hour long weekly wraps rather than a nightly.
Yeah. Did you watch any of Letterman's Netflix specials?
Yeah, so his series, which, oh gosh, I can't think of the very lengthy title now. It's David Letterman.
No need for any introduction or something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've seen most of them, and the one that I probably enjoyed the most was him interviewing George Clooney, and that was just because he went to visit Clooney's parents' house, and there was a really great sequence with that, and I got a real kick out of that. And also, he interviewed, is her name Malalia?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he went and visited her on campus, and I thought that was a really sort of fun, interesting experience. So I really liked what he was doing with the format of that show. But again, that's him not doing late night. That's him doing something else entirely.
Bit more Cavett style stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that was this week's Screen Watching Middle Bit, which is quickly emerging as the favorite part of the show for both you and I. What's next, Dan?
Well, usually I'd play a little bit of a stinger here, but we're not going to do that. And I'm not going to edit the podcast. Those guys can listen to the raw deal here. Wait a second. Let's play a stinger or some description.
Seems appropriate.
That's not great.
Hey, Cheers is filmed before a live studio audience.
Also appropriate.
Thanks, Carla.
All right. The week ahead in TV series. What do you got for us?
Okay, look, it is the last couple of weeks have delivered some really great TV. Like really some of the best TV I've seen like in some time have been in the last week. And next week can't help but disappoint me, I'm sure. But the big things, and why are we adding this onto the list? RuPaul's Drag Race UK versus the World, Season 1, Episode 1, debuts on Stan on the 2nd of February.
I just like to hear you say it.
Like, sure. Sorry. This isn't like a drag queen thing. It's just a reality TV thing. I don't know why Simon keeps doing this to me. Some scripted stuff, which are things that I care a bit more about. Raised by Wolves Season 2 premieres on February 3rd. Now, Raised by Wolves, I watched the first episode of and thought it was quite good. Never felt compelled to keep watching it.
No, didn't watch it. Didn't watch it.
Directed the first episode. I don't know how much involvement he's had since then. We've got Netflix with Murderville, and that debuts on the 3rd of February. This is a innovative format. It's actually a format from the UK, apparently. And the premise of this is that Will Arnett plays a police detective. He has a guest with him. So late night talk show host Conan O'Brien is one of the guest stars in the first season.
Sure.
And the idea is that Will Arnett knows kind of what's going on, but the guest star is coming along to solve the murder mystery with a whole bunch of weird stuff being thrown at them. So it's a comedy and it's a whodunit, and you've got a guest who doesn't really quite know what's going on. And in
you have reservations. You have reservations. What are your reservations, Dan? I can hear it in your voice.
I've got 2 reservations. One, this sounds a lot like the Australian formats. Thank God You're Here. Which
yes, it does.
I really like that because you had a guest who was being thrown into a thing that they had to solve. But what I liked about that is you had a live studio audience with them, and so they were playing off that. Okay, and so the vibe of those shows, it's a little bit like when you're playing Celebrity Heads or something like that, where you don't know the answer, but everyone around you knows the answer. And so you're kind of there trying to play catch up to everyone else. But I kind of feel that when it's a pre-taped thing, it kind of loses a little bit of the fun and charm of that as an idea. So that element just kind of throws me a little bit. But the thing that really puts me off wanting to watch Murderville is Will Arnett.
Ooh, why? That's controversial. I'm a fan.
But like, he's never good. Like, there's never anything that is particularly good in outside of being Job and Arrested Development. That was a perfect combination of actor and character. Outside of that, like,
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with that. He has had some trouble finding material that suits his very unique delivery and comedy stylings. I'm hoping this works for him because you hear him on podcasts and you hear him on the talk show circuit, and he's entertaining and funny and a little bit blue, and so I'm hoping that Murderville brings that out of him. But you're not wrong; he has had trouble finding material that suits him.
Yeah, he's like Joel McHale, which. Like, I just think
Good
it's
comparison
to find something that works for either of them. That's such specific character, such specific presences. The thing I'm actually fairly excited by is Pam and Tommy, which is the mini series from Craig Gillespie, who directed I, Tonya, and it's about the Pam and Tommy sex tape for the 90s. So really good cast in this one. It looks funny, it looks really engaging, and from what I understand about it, if you watch the first 2 episodes and just find it a little bit crass and just a little bit over the top in the way that it seems to be just celebrating the gonzo nature of the sex tape, I think it's maybe 5 or 6 episodes, but the first 2 or 3 episodes are very much leaning into that, but the rest of the series takes it in quite a different direction and really sort of delves into the emotional fallout and becomes a much more substantial thing afterwards, which is very intense. And one of the things I heard during the week was that the director of A Teacher, which is a show that we reviewed on this podcast very early in, as I recall, she's directing one of the episodes. And if you think about what A Teacher did, which is that they played around the first couple of episodes with it being a little bit sexy and making you complicit in the illicit relationship between a teacher and student, and then they start really sort of showing the ramifications of that. She's one of the directors on board, start showing the ramifications. So the fact that hiring directors like her, and her name escapes me right now, like that to me suggests that this is a show that is a little bit smarter and a bit more well-intentioned than may initially be evident on screen.
And the fact that they've got people like Lily James and Sebastian Stan to play Pam and Tommy, they've got Nick Offerman and Seth Rogen in there to play the 2 scumbags who get hold of the tape format as well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. This is one of my must-watch for the year. Looks like a great, and by all account, they recreate the period terribly well as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, look, it looks fantastic. But there's a couple of movies on streaming this week as well. What have we got?
Well, I'm a big fan of Shudder, which is the streaming platform that us horror nerds love watching. There's a movie debuting this week called Slapface, terrible name for film, but this is the story of a young boy who's going through his own trauma. His parents have recently passed away. He's living with his older brother, and his PTSD takes the form of this deep woodland witch who starts to live with him, and it's got some very scary moments in it. And for the title alone, I'd watch The Tinder Swindler. February 2nd on Netflix. This is the story of a con man who poses a billionaire playboy on Tinder and the group of women who set out to bring him down. This is from the producers of 2 great documentaries, The Imposter and Don't F With Cats, both of which have been huge hits on the streaming platforms. And with those credentials, The Tinder Swindler from February 2 on Netflix looks like a bit of a must-watch for me.
Yeah, now we've got a event taking place where you can head outdoors, watch a movie.
Yeah, look, the 25th anniversary is happening at the moment of Westpac Open Air Cinema, which is on Sydney Harbour until February 2nd. And this year they've got a whole lot of really sort of great films that have kind of skimmed through cinemas, things like Licorice Pizza, Joaquin Phoenix in Come On, Come On, one of my favourite films in the year, The Worst Person in the World, Peter Dinklage in Cyrano. These are films that are either premiering on streaming platforms or have had sort of token cinema releases. Get along to the Open Air Cinema for the Sydney listeners on Sydney Harbour until February 22nd.
Yeah, look, I've gone to not necessarily the open air. I think I've been to that version of the cinema once, but outdoor movie theaters, I don't know, they just feel like gimmick and I never really enjoy it so much. It just doesn't quite feel.
Yeah, it's more about than just watching the movie. I think there's a bit of a thrill about watching the outdoor cinema. What did we watch? I think we watched the first Wormwood film, that crazy zombie thing. That we did that at an outdoor cinema, and it was perfectly suited to sitting in a beanbag under the stars and watching it. But yeah, there's some stuff which hasn't worked. People get their phones out, and people, I hate them.
Yeah, no, exactly. But if you want to go and get some expensive wine, pay too much for a movie ticket and the movie
$11 for a sandwich. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Like, it's an experience. People seem to enjoy it, but yeah, it's just not for me, maybe. Hey, this week in history, we've got on January 30, 2013, we've got the debut of The Americans with Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys.
A film, a show that's always sort of skirted with huge sort of breakout success, but never quite did. But boy, it was a great series. The first couple of seasons were some of the best things on TV.
Yeah. We've got the anniversary, January 31, 1949, the first daytime soap on TV, and TV is an important word there. You've got These Are My Children. Is that the name of the show?
Yeah, apparently it was.
Okay.
I was there. And then things get a little bit crazy.
The thing with soaps is that most of them started as radio serials.
Yes,
so
they did. Yeah.
Like All My Children, for example, I'm pretty sure was one of these shows. And so a lot of them just made the migration over. And some of them were actually airing simultaneous serials where the serials continued on radio, but also were on TV. And what I don't know is if they had the same storylines or if they started having like a split branch narrative come out.
That's interesting. And they're called soap operas because the very first sponsors were the soap companies, hence the name soap operas. So that's interesting.
Yeah, but anyway, Simon, I hear that on February 1, things got pretty crazy.
Yeah, look, let's go back to 1893, which was good crazy. Thomas Edison opens the first movie studio in West Orange, New Jersey on February 1. Then bad crazy. In 1978, director Roman Polanski skips bail on statutory rape charges and flees to France. And then on February 1, 2004, I guess also good crazy, I'm not quite sure, Janet Jackson's breast is exposed during the Super Bowl halftime show, the most famous wardrobe malfunction in history.
It's
Everyone's
just
crazy.
Nipple. It's just
it's a nipple, and it wasn't even a nipple. The nipple was covered. It was the whole breast, but I don't want to get into all that now.
Indeed. Hey, some birthdays. Let's celebrate those. January 30 on 1930. I got Gene Hackman. Is he officially retired yet? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I think he has. Yeah.
Yeah, the star of great things like Bonnie and Clyde, The Conversation, The French Connection, The Birdcage, and The Royal Tenenbaums. Simon, quickly, favorite Gene Hackman film?
Oh, that's a tough one. See, I loved the late 80s, early 90s Gene Hackman. I remember him opposite Kevin Costner in No Way Out. The Birdcage was very funny. Certainly The French Connection. See, doing a live broadcast, that's the front door bell going off right now, which my wife is rushing to answer. So yeah, what about you? Favorite Gene Hackman film?
Look, I mean, I don't know if I could label just one. Like, it's probably The Royal Tenenbaums, but also, look, I mean, I really like The Conversation. I'm a big fan of some of his later, like, post-Tenenbaums films. Like, he did a great David Mamet film called Heist, where
yes, he did.
That was one of my favorites. And that was a bit of a throwback as well to, I want to say the film's called Night Moves, which is like a mid-80s Gene Hackman film.
Arthur Penn film, yeah. 70s it was, actually. I would also point out his cameo as the blind man in Young Frankenstein, still one of the funniest things I've ever seen on screen. So yes, happy birthday, Gene Hackman, who has officially retired, but is still, by all accounts, in touch wood, given the start to the year we've had, he's in fairly good health. So happy birthday, Gene.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that neither of us, in terms of favorite Gene Hackman movies, mentioned his last film.
Welcome to Mooseport with Ray Romano.
Oh, God. I'm nervous right now. I want us to do my Romano impersonation, which is very good, but I can't.
Do it.
I can't do it.
You've got to do. You can't throw it out there and not do it. This is YouTube.
I can't. We can't do it. It's going to destroy my political career. January 30, 1974, we got the birth of one Olivia Colman, star of Peep Show, The Favourite, and The Last Order.
I watched The Lost Order through the week. I wasn't a fan of The Lost Order. I don't think that deserves all the Oscar buzz. But January 31, 1970, the lovely Minnie Driver, star of Good Will Hunting, it was born. I love Minnie Driver. One of my favorite young actresses, February 1st, 1994, Julia Garner. Now, she stars in Ozark. She stars in a wonderful film called The Assistant. Well, it's not a wonderful film. It's a tough watch, but it's a great movie. She's terrific. And Australia's own Isla Fisher from Arrested Development, and who was a breakout star because of the film The Wedding Crashers. She was born February 3rd, 1976. Happy birthday, Isla.
And look at you neglecting her biggest role ever as spokesperson for the ING direct ads.
Yes, which she was very funny in.
Yeah, sure. Hey, let's sign off. Folks, thank you very much for listening and maybe watching, screen watching. My name is Dan Barrett. You can find me on Twitter at the Dan Barrett. You can start your day with my free newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching, that you can find at alwaysbewatching.com. It's got the big stories in TV, streaming, and film. And on Fridays, I've got the Always Be Streaming newsletter, which recounts the big shows that launched that very week.
Visit me, Simon Foster. I'm on the Twitter at SimonRFoster1. Read my words over at screen-space.net. Do visit the Screen Watching Facebook page, which I went a bit crazy with this week. I was putting all sorts of stuff up there. And you'll be able to watch this and a whole lot of other stuff on the Screen Watching YouTube channel, uncut interviews, fresh trailers, and now us, which is a big deal.
Indeed. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can follow Screen Watching via your favorite podcast app. Load it up, hit the follow or subscribe button, whatever little thing it says on your various app of choice. And that way the podcast will just arrive there on your phone. You don't even have to think about the darn thing. Simon, you're here. This is the end of the podcast.
Happy birthday, mate. That was our first birthday podcast. We're making the same mistakes we made a year ago, which is an important thing to note. Well done to you for a great year gone by. You've put in a lot of hard work on this, and I'm having a ball. So I hope the listeners are as well.
Yeah, now I neglected to load up a goodbye theme song. So a closing tune?
Do your Ray Romano.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, God, no. I'll get it out of him, listeners. I promise one day.
It'll happen. Folks, this has been Screen Watching. Thank you very much for listening.
Are we out?